Hello again, football fans, and welcome to another edition of Miners Live. I am the head coach and general manager, but most importantly, the host for you this evening. Another Wednesday edition, 7 p.m. Eastern Time of Miners Live. Really, the biggest news I have for you this week is the Week 6 coaches poll. Last week, you guys got to see the inaugural, if you will, the very first coaches poll was unveiled, and it did not happen without plenty of controversy. Not just controversy, but a lot of you apparently don't understand the concept of a coaches poll. It is a coaches plural, coach as poll, not coach poll. It's not me. It's not Coach Baker, who will be joining me in less than 15 minutes to unveil the Week 6 coaches poll. Coach Baker, for those of you that don't know, head coach, general manager of the Houston Voyagers, is part of the war room, if you will, for the coaches poll. So if you did not grasp the concept last week, this poll is comprised of several coaches. Right now, there are 8 of us. I believe this week, actually, there was only 7 coaches that submitted ranks. So 7 coaches, actual RFL coaches, came together, put together their top 10 ranks of the college series, and that's what this rank will be. It will be unveiled every Wednesday night at 7:15. So if you miss the beginning of the show, that's fine. It's not going to happen right at the onset of the show. We're going to get a little bit of buildup. I'm going to get some time to go over last week's coaches poll, give you guys an idea what to expect for those of you newcomers. If you haven't already, for those of you that aren't new, or for those of you that are new, I'm sorry, please go ahead and subscribe to the YouTube channel. We've already hit the 100 subscriber mark. For those of you that didn't know, DJ Evans won the subscriber t-shirt giveaway. And I actually had the pleasure of informing him today that his shirt is in the mail and he should receive that on Saturday. So we'll probably do another giveaway, some sort of other swag giveaway, if you will. I'm not quite sure what. Maybe someone in the chat can come up with some sort of good idea. I don't think I'm going to wait to do 200 subscribers on YouTube. That's a little crazy, but maybe something else. Maybe we'll do something throughout the college series. Maybe I'll do a trivia or something that we can put together, and do some giveaways that way. But most important thing, Week 6 coaches poll will be unveiled momentarily here, just a little over 10 minutes away from the new coaches poll being unveiled. So that's obviously going to be super exciting. I'm sure plenty of you will have something to say about that. Also want to get into a little bit on defense, and I think I'll touch on this with Coach Baker when he gets on the show and joins me. Who is the best defense right now in the college series? Because you look at some of the teams that are at the top of the coaches poll, at the top of the ranks, some of the teams that get a lot of run, and some of them are one-sided. Whether they have a good defense, they don't have a good offense. They have a good offense, they don't necessarily have a good defense. So I think it's interesting to take a moment and kind of look at not quite the midway point of the season, but get an idea of who we think some of those top defenses are. And I'll ask Coach Baker who he thinks the number 1 defense is in the college series, and see if him and I agree. I have a feeling that it'll be a little interesting. I'll throw some numbers out there that you guys might not be aware of and give you an idea of what these defenses actually look like and what they're doing on a weekly basis. Obviously, some of the heavy hitters, some of the big defenses out there, but there's a couple other teams out that are having really good defensive seasons that aren't getting as much play and aren't getting as much recognition. So we'll talk a little bit about that. And then last week you saw I unveiled the coaches edition of the top 5 RFL draft prospects for the quarterback position, and then also the top 5 RFL prospects for the running back position. But now this week, on the show, we will have the top 5 wide receivers when it comes to in terms of the RFL draft. And so that'll be a little bit later on in the show. And again, I'll have Coach Baker to go over that a little bit with me as well. So that's the show for you. That's what we got lined up. Take a quick peek out at the chat room, see what we've got going on here. I know I saw Killian Bain out there earlier, Ronnie Shanahan, Eric Ashley, Daniel Silverio, always good to have you. Faded Red, Alvin Mack, Miles McCain. Miles McCain will also probably be joining the show a little bit later on as well. So we'll get his thoughts on the wide receiver top 5. Obviously, that's something that is of interest to him, as he will likely be throwing balls to wide receivers, possibly one of those top 5 wide receivers at the next level in the RFL. Monty Wyatt out there, Anthony Fry, Rohan, my good buddy Rohan, Trey Drain, Cam Baker, Darius Hodge. Always good to have you guys. So if you have questions throughout the day, throughout the show, throw those questions in there. I will do my best to keep an eye on it and mark some of those for you. I know a lot of times they can get buried. So if you do have a question, feel free to throw them up there. Let's see, what do we got here? Tajay needs to get on the Miners podcast. First of all, it's not the Miners podcast. It's Miners Live. If you don't know the name of the show, you better recognize. You can't come on the show if you don't know the name of the show. Okay. The name of the show is not the Miners podcast. It's Miners Live. Be better. Be better, Cam Baker. Be better. What else we got? Dorian Chavis. Boy, have I heard there's a lot of controversy around you right now, my man. You, my friend, you might need to come on Miners Live and explain yourself, but we'll save that for another show potentially. Cam Baker, I got a concussion. Yeah, all right, fine. You're allowed. You're allowed. Are you sure? Trey Jordan, are you sure ankle's not hurt? All right, so we are about 7 minutes away from the week 6 coaches poll. So before I do that, I'm going to take a moment and go back to the week 5 coaches poll, give everyone a look at what the coaches poll looked like last week. Remember, this was a special Saturday morning edition of Miners Live, a Miners game day, if you will. So here's what the 6 through 10 rankings looked like last week. Coming in at number 10, the Maryland Terrapins. 9 was the Alabama Crimson Tide. And at number 8, the North Carolina Tar Heels. Now, obviously, they suffered a big loss at the hands of South Carolina. It'll be interesting to see whether or not they remain in the top 10 or if, in fact, that loss to South Carolina knocks them out. The Oregon Ducks, another team that suffered a loss this past week. So interested to see if they remain in the top 10. And the Washington Huskies, 3 teams right there who all suffered losses. So we'll have to wait and see if they can hang on to their top 10 spots or if perhaps there are some teams that have jumped them and will make their way onto the top 10 for the coaches poll. So again, number 10, Maryland. Number 9, Alabama. Number 8 was North Carolina. Number 7, Oregon. And number 6 was the Washington Huskies. And now the top 5. Here's what the top 5 looked like last week for the coaches poll. Again, this was the first ever coaches poll. So the West Virginia Mountaineers came in at number 5. The USC Trojans had 51 points, came in at the number 4 spot. And then TCU and Miami had the same number of points. They both had 69 points, but Miami got the tiebreaker over TCU. So TCU comes in at number 3. Miami came in at number 2. And then the Ohio State Buckeyes with 75 points, leading the way, leading the college series for week 5 in terms of the coaches poll at the number 1 spot. Again, if you are new and you did not get a chance to watch this, when we unveiled it live on Saturday morning, the points that you see on the right-hand side, those points are comprised of a point value that is associated for each coach and where they have each team ranked. So, for example, if I have the Ohio State Buckeyes ranked at number 1, they get 10 points. If I have them ranked at number 2, they get 9 points. If I have them ranked at number 3, they get 8 points, and they go down 1 point for every spot that you have them ranked. And again, this isn't just me. This is 7 other coaches that got together. So, for example, if I have Ohio State at number 1 and Baker has Ohio State at number 2, then between the two of us, there is 19 points for Ohio State. So as you can see, Ohio State had 75 points last week, leading the way. And let's see what that looks like as we get prepared to unveil the Week 6 coaches poll. And before we get into it, I'm going to go ahead and bring in my co-host for this evening's show. He is the general manager of the Houston Voyagers, fresh off a trip to the Relo Bowl. I'm just going to go ahead and bring him in. I don't think there's anything else that I can say after that, other than congratulations on making the Relo Bowl. I'm only moderately jealous. I'm sick and tired of winning the division and losing in the first round. Coach Baker, what's going on, buddy?
Hey, what's going on, Coach Dunn? Good to be here with you. Hopefully you can hear me.
I can. I got you good.
Perfect. All right. As you can see, I'm still at work. I saw that you have your hoodie on, so I had to do a quick change, take the work shirt off, put the Voyagers hoodie on here. So
let me ask you
a question. Thanks for having me, man. Appreciate it.
Yeah, of course. Anytime. Let me ask you a question. That hoodie that you've got on, is that from season? Is that from the year prior?
This is a homemade special. So I actually had this one made two seasons ago.
Okay.
Right before somebody sent out the communication saying don't use the logos anymore. Snuck it in under the wire.
You did get it in there. And well, I think that's also, isn't that the old logo? That's not
that's the old one.
That's not a redone logo. Yeah. So that's a little different. We can't do obviously we can't have the remade logos put in. So we are moments away. You had a chance to see the Week 5 coaches poll and what that looked like. Anything strike you in terms of that Week 5 poll? I'll go ahead and pull up the 6 through 10 here a minute just to give you another chance to look at it. But spoiler alert. Anything that you see here on the 6 through 10 from last week?
No, nothing jumps out at me on that. I think some folks had some issues with Alabama being up there. I didn't though. I think they're a solid team. I think they deserve to be in the top 10. I did not have Maryland in my top 10. I can't remember who I had. I may have had Georgia right there at that 10 spot last week on mine. But that 6 through 10, I think is right for last week. And the 1 through 5, I definitely don't think you can argue with the 1 through 5.
Yeah, and I think when you look here, it's certainly interesting because you mentioned you didn't have Maryland in the top 10, but when you look at 6 through 10 here, Washington lost, Oregon lost, and North Carolina lost, and Maryland didn't play. So by default here, you would imagine that Maryland's going to skyrocket up the boards here simply because, maybe they won't surpass Alabama, but North Carolina could likely be out. Oregon possibly out. Washington, who knows how far they're going to fall down. So Alabama and Maryland could be poised to make jumps here as we are just moments away from the official unveiling of the Week 6 coaches poll. And then, so the 1 through 5 here, you mentioned no big shock here.
No big shock there. I think you can probably, maybe shuffle a team or two around just based on your kind of personal preference and from watching the games and whatnot. But I don't think anybody can argue with that top 5 from last week.
Were you okay with Miami over TCU, or would you have, and again, this is last week, right? Would you have had TCU ahead of Miami in that 2-3 slot there?
I don't remember where I put them last week, but you can make the argument. I think so. I think Miami, when I think about Miami, I definitely think about defense. I'm still a little bit concerned about the offense and their ability to move the ball down the field. TCU has definitely shown that, they can score at will when they need to. So even when they're down sometimes in games, they're not out of it, right? So they can go deep and make up that, that point differential and get back on top. So I would probably give the edge a little bit to TCU there just because of the offensive firepower.
All right. Well, it is officially that time. It is 7:15 on the Eastern time zone. And so we're just going to go ahead and get right into it. I'm going to pull up the 6 through 10 for the week 6 coaches poll. We'll go over that a little bit, and then we will bring up the 1 through 5. But without any further ado, guys, it is that time. So here's teams 6 through 10 on the week 6 edition of the coaches poll. And sure enough, Maryland making a jump. Maryland was in at number 10 last week, all the way up to number 7 now, and they didn't even play, right? So a bye week for Maryland, but because of the losses around the teams above them, they jump all the way to number 7. So in at number 10, the Georgia Bulldogs. Coach Baker, you mentioned it. You believe you had Georgia in that 10 spot last week, and they didn't quite make it. Well, now they do. They break into the top 10. And look, Georgia started 0-2, but they've won 3 games in a row, and they've looked pretty good doing so. So I certainly agree with Georgia here at the 10 spot. Baylor makes their way into the top 10 in at number 9. West Virginia, a little bit of a drop here. We saw them at number 5 with that loss. They drop all the way down to number 8 with a 23-point total. And then there's Maryland getting 27 points. They are now in at number 7. And the Texas Longhorns. The Texas Longhorns have looked awfully impressive. If you look back, I think, yeah, here it is right here. They have beat Washington and Alabama, which in the official college series top 25, Washington at number 6 and Alabama at number 9, or maybe that's going off of last week's coaches poll. I think that's what last week's coaches poll was: Washington 6 and Bama 9. And this Texas Longhorn team has beat both of them. So any issues here, and what are your initial thoughts on 6 through 10 here?
6 through 10 looks good. You've got 10 teams with 2 losses. So you're kind of talking about separation from those first 6, 7, 8, 9, first 7 teams, and then the next 10, right? And that's where you get into, Baylor, Tennessee, Georgia, LSU, Oklahoma, North Carolina, West Virginia, Washington, Penn State, and Oregon. To me, Georgia stands out as a 2-loss team, and Baylor also stands out as a 2-loss team there. So that makes, I think that makes sense. West Virginia, yeah, they had a loss, but it was definitely against a very tough team. I don't know if I would. I don't know. Those last 3, I don't know. I think you could probably move those around a little bit if you wanted to. Someone could make an argument that maybe West Virginia belongs in that 10 spot as opposed to 7, but I don't see any issue there. I'm glad to see my Longhorns up there. Fry, I know you're very excited about that as well. I know secretly you're rooting for them Horns. And Maryland, of course, jumping up a little bit. Even though they did have the bye week, they're still sitting there at 3-1 and have looked pretty solid this season also. So I have no issue with them, moving up a little bit as well.
Is Fry closetly rooting for the Longhorns? I thought he hated them. He was an A&M guy.
It's one of those deals where he hates them so much that you think he kind of actually likes them.
He's like he's going
over the top. He's going over the top with it too much.
He's like everyone. He's like everyone from the state of Ohio. They just root for whatever team is still playing, whatever team is still alive, or whatever team is good. If Ohio State loses, fine. We'll just root for Akron or Kent State or anyone else in the state of Ohio. I get it. Ohio and Texas, you are very similar in that regard.
Well, at least Fry has a connection to A&M, so that's good. I'll give him that.
That's right. All right. Initial reactions from everyone here in the chat. Super Cam, surprised a little bit. Texas at number 6. I didn't think we'd be that high. Cam Shule, wide receiver at Texas. I mean, look, you won some important games against good teams. Washington has looked really good at times. And certainly Alabama, which, conveniently enough, I guess spoiler alert here, but Alabama was in at number 9 last week. And we talked about some teams that were ahead of them and having lost, and you don't see Alabama here in 6 through 10. So by process of elimination, I'm going to go ahead and assume that Alabama's in the top 5 here, folks. There's no reason why they would have dropped, and they're not here 6 through 10. So I don't think this is exactly breaking news, but it's about to be that Alabama is going to make the top 5 here. And so we'll just go ahead and get into the top 5. Here it is, the top 5 teams for week 6 in the coaches poll. Coming in at number 5, you have the Alabama Crimson Tide with 32 points. And now here's where it gets a little bit interesting, because the Miami Hurricanes come in at number 4. They've got 49 total points, and they're 5-0. But again, this is why the coaches poll is so unique and so different and so important, because it is not straight chalk. It is not going to be 100% based on record and record alone. It's going to be based on coaches and their opinions and who they think the best teams are and how they are performing right now. And I can certainly understand why Miami would be below Ohio State, below TCU, and even below USC. Yes, Miami is undefeated. Yes, they have a fantastic defense. But the reality is, the last 3 games that they have played, they have been losing in the fourth quarter, and they have relied on late comebacks in order to win those games. So I'm not going to sit here and say that Miami's the best team in the country just because they're 5-0. And I'm not going to say they're the second best team in the country just because they're 5-0. And the only other team that's 5-0 is TCU. By that logic, TCU would be ahead of Ohio State. And as you can see right here, they're not. Coming in at number 3 is the USC Trojans. Number 2, TCU remains. Well, I guess actually they jump up to number 2 because they were number 3. And then Ohio State remains number 1 with a total of 67 points. Now, one thing I will say, last week there were 8 coaches that participated in the coaches poll, and this week there was only 7. So the total points are going to be a little bit lower in the grand scheme of things. So just keep that in mind if you're looking at the number 1 overall team, wondering how come last week the number 1 overall team, Ohio State, had 75, right? But now this week they only have 67, because again, there was one less coaches poll, if you will, one less coach providing their rankings. So that's potentially 10 points that Ohio State missed out on if that coach had put Ohio State in at number 1. All right, Baker, what do you got here? 1 through 5. There it is. Obviously, the obvious, the debate here is Miami at number 4, but, is there something else that you see here that kind of strikes you?
No, that's it. I think that's the elephant in the room, and I'm wondering where all the palm trees are at, man. Y'all should be celebrating. You're in the top 5. But I don't think Miami is going to be happy unless they're ranked up there 1, 2, or 3. Really, probably 1 or 2. But that's just their mentality, and I definitely like that competitive spirit. But yeah, for me, it's I don't think I can put USC in front of Miami. I talked a little bit earlier about Miami's offense and still thinking they're a little bit suspect. But USC's offense is suspect at times as well. They haven't, just really put the hammer down on a lot of teams, I guess is a good way to say it. And Calvin Poole isn't really putting up the big numbers that he put up last season yet. And to me, hasn't really looked like the quarterback that he looked like last season yet. Still a lot of season left to go, obviously. A lot of games still to play. And, I think he can start to improve, with the schedule they have as well. But, I wouldn't put USC at 3. I'd put Miami there, then USC and Alabama.
Yeah, I thought it was interesting. I will be honest. I actually this was my top 4. I don't think I had Bama at 5. I may have, but this was my top 4. So I was curious to see if I was alone in that. And it's nice to see that obviously I'm not. There were several other people out there that felt like Miami just wasn't that team. They certainly were not going to, they were certainly going to get passed by TCU. The win that they had this past week and the way that they won was not going to be good enough for them to remain ahead of TCU if the points total were tied. And clearly you see here, there's quite a bit of a gap now. Obviously 11-point differential between TCU and Miami, whereas last week they had the same number of points. So clearly, at least from the coach's perspective, Baker, myself, several other coaches, Miami has something to prove. And I know they probably like that. That's going to be motivation for them. And that's going to drive them. And we'll see palm trees in the chat during every game. And we'll see, calls of haters and all this other stuff. But the reality is right now they're not playing great football. And Baker, it seems like you would have had Miami ahead of USC at number 3, but I think you said you agree. TCU, you would have had what? Would you have Ohio State, TCU, Miami?
Right. Yeah, I think Miami. When you talk about teams that should be ranked high and really good teams, they find a way to win, right? So yeah, they've had some close games. They've had to battle back, but really good teams do that. Even when they're down, they know they're not out of it. You see that in the chat all the time with Miami, right? Even if they're down 2 touchdowns or 3 touchdowns, they're still talking it because they feel like they can come back. They know they can come back. To me, that's the sign of a winner, and I think they can definitely keep doing that this season. But I would agree. They still haven't had, I don't think, that signature win where they just come out and look like the Miami of last season, or just come out and completely dominate a team from start to finish. Throughout the whole game. So maybe that's coming up here in the near future. They've got some soft spots in the schedule coming up, and then obviously Baylor, they're sitting there in week 13, which will be a great showdown, I think.
Yeah, I think as we get a little bit closer, as some of these teams have their bye week, it'll be pretty interesting to see how it phases out, how it plays out in the weeks to come. I did want to spotlight something here that I saw in the chat from where did it go? I think it was from Cam. Maybe I lost it. But it was talking about Clemson and how Clemson almost knocked off Miami. And look, I remember a couple weeks ago, I had Mitch on the show, and we were talking about some sneaky good teams and some teams that I thought were not in the top 10, probably not in the top 12 or 15, but had a chance at potentially making a run at the Final Four. And I had 2 teams. Clemson was one of them and Washington was the other. At the time, Washington was outside the top 10. Then they worked their way in, but Clemson was the other one. And I think Clemson was like 15 at the time. And then they went out and they got waxed by Baylor. So that kind of made me look a little foolish. But then they go out and they have a good showing against Miami. And look, there's still a chance that Clemson is the number 2 seed, even if Miami is the number 1 in the ACC. And then Clemson's got another shot at Miami in the ACC championship game. And if Clemson can win that ACC championship game, then there's some debate, then there's some conversation. Is Clemson worthy of getting into the Final Four at that point? And who knows what happens with them the rest of the way. But certainly, if they win and they beat the teams that they should beat, then you could have that conversation potentially with Clemson. What are your thoughts on Clemson, I guess, Baker? And, am I just a high man on them? Do you agree? Do you think that they're one of those teams that could be sneaky good later on? Or do you think they're kind of a bit of a fraud?
No, I definitely think they could be, maybe have a better second half of the season here. I remember early on, my sneaky team was going to be Arizona State. I thought on paper they had some talent. They looked really good. I thought, especially the quarterback position, but they've kind of fizzled as well. But they might make a late run also. Clemson, I think, really comes down to quarterback play, and if Cardenas is the guy or not. I actually liked him quite a bit last year. I liked how comfortable he looked in the pocket and all that, but I don't know. It's going to take him, I think, really stepping up and having some bigger games. And then Noah Walker, who I'm a big fan of as well, trying to get him the rock to mix it up and have some run and pass. But they've got to, really got to start outscoring teams, and the defense has got to step up and start, get some stops in big key moments as well if they want to have a chance at it.
So Faded Red here. I hope scouts have been watching the Texas QB. So he's referring to Jordan Granger. Absolutely. I mean, I would imagine you have caught a couple games of his, Baker, and have been, eyeing him a little bit. Obviously a Texas quarterback. I would imagine the general manager of the Houston RFL team might have a little bit of a vested interest in possibly keeping Jordan Granger home, or at least close to home. What are your thoughts? Have you caught a lot of his games or no?
I've caught most of them. There's a lot of speculation out there right now about what we're going to do at the fourth and eighth pick in the draft. I know some folks are talking about.
Yeah, here it is right here.
Us
Anthony
taking a
Fry.
quarterback.
Anthony Fry. Ask Coach Baker who he's going to take at 4 and 8. There you go.
Right, yeah.
Now you're on the spot.
Right. Yeah. Let me just lay it all out there for you, Fry. I'll tell you exactly who we're taking. I'll tell you, we are looking at every position. If you look at our roster, we're not. We don't have any glaring holes anywhere. So we're trying to keep ourselves in a position every year where we can take best player available and plug them in there. But hey, Glenn Hayes getting up there in age. He's only a 90 overall quarterback. He's in a contract year, so we'll see how much money he wants. And
yeah, so that was
we might hedge our bets a little bit, and we might not.
Yeah. So that was an interesting rumor that started swirling the other day. I kind of came to the defense of
I kind of started it though.
Okay.
Yeah, I kind of started it with a comment on Back Talk.
I came to the defense of Glenn Hay. I mean, yes, he's 33 years old. You say he's only a 90 overall quarterback. I mean, 90 overall quarterbacks, pretty darn good. I think he had what did he have? 750 yards in the first 2 games of the season last year with about 7 touchdowns or 8 touchdowns.
Yeah, he started off on fire and
he led
had
to
a really
the
good
Real
season.
Bowl.
Had a great, yeah, oh yeah, sure. Yeah, I'm being somewhat coy here. I think folks who are fans of the league and fans of the Warriors probably know that that's not realistic, but never know.
What else we got here? I see Coach Back. So Coach Back, another member of the coaches union, if you will, says he had TCU at, he doesn't remember exactly, but either 4 or 5. Now, to me, that is absolute blasphemy. And that's grounds for being removed from the union, right? Like, how can you justify having TCU? Let's assume, let's give him the benefit of the doubt here, Baker. Go ahead and defend Back and his stance of having TCU at number 4. And I'll go ahead and pull him back up here for you. TCU at number 4. Can you do it?
You want me to defend?
You can't do it.
I don't think so. No, because you have 3 undefeated teams, right? Ohio State, Miami, and TCU. Those, I don't think you can push any one of those teams to that 4th position. So, if you want to debate 1, 2, and 3 between Ohio State, Miami, TCU, then we can debate that all day long. But tell me that Bama, Texas, USC, Maryland are better than TCU. I can't make that argument. Is he arguing that USC is better?
I would imagine he would have to be. I don't. Again, the responses and the results are completely anonymous, so I don't know whose poll is whose. But I would imagine that if he's got TCU at 4, then it's Ohio State, USC, Miami, and then TCU. I mean, I can't imagine that. And if he has him at 5, then God have mercy on his soul, because I don't understand who's he got at 4 then if he's got TCU at 5. Does he have Bama up there? Does he have Baylor up there? Like, I just don't get it. We've got
I think if anything, he's probably going with USC, but yeah, I can't make that argument.
So here's an interesting back and forth here. This brings up a good debate, because I think a lot of people see this play out on a weekly basis. So Cam Shule says, as long as TCU's defense doesn't let up, they can compete with any team. Then Coach Back immediately fires back, and I get it, but that's the same argument for Miami, just switched, right? Because for as good as TCU's offense is, let's say that's the equivalent of Miami's defense. And then what Back is saying is, well, that's the same thing as Miami's offense being the equivalent of TCU's defense. But I think that's where the difference is. I think Miami's offense is more of a liability than TCU's defense. And, we can sit here and say defense wins championships and all that stuff. But I think when it comes down to it, Miami's offense is more of a liability to them than TCU's defense is. And if TCU finds themselves down by 3 or down by 4 or down by 6 on the final drive of the fourth quarter, I like their chances of still winning that game with those weapons that they have. Look, people want to talk about, and I'll pull it up with you so you can see, and we can get your thoughts on it. The top 5 prospects for the RFL draft at the quarterback position. Miles McCain was number 1 because of the points, but he didn't get a single vote for number 1 quarterback, which is interesting. And that's why this coach's poll and this coach's union here that we have is so fun, because you've got a guy like Miles McCain who gets the most points, but he never got a single number 1 quarterback vote. So, what are your thoughts on that argument there? I guess the TCU defense and the Miami offense versus the TCU offense and the Miami defense. Do you lean one way or another in terms of that sort of dichotomy or that conversation?
Yeah, if I'm betting on either the TCU defense or the Miami offense, I'm going to bet on the TCU defense. I think Miami's struggles are mostly in the passing game. They can definitely move the ball on the ground, but I worry about them being able to put up points quickly if they need to. They've been able to keep some games close, been able to battle back and get those wins, but eventually they're going to take on a team that's not going to let up on them, and they're going to have to go deep often just to catch up. And I think that puts them at a disadvantage. You're basically taking Nelly out of the game at that point, out of the game plan. And think about it like this: if it's a 1-to-1 matchup, TCU has an early lead, 2 or 3 scores, and it's getting late in the game. I'm putting my money on TCU's defense over Miami's offense.
Yeah,
to close it out.
And that's not a knock on Miami's rushing attack at all, because we've seen Nelly Hodge last week. You saw the top 5 running back prospects. He was 1 point away from being the unanimous runaway as the number 1 running back. There was one coach out there, I don't know who it was, but one coach out there had Hodge as the number 2 running back prospect and not the number 1. So instead of getting a total of 35 points, he only got 34 points. Miami's got a great running game. So I guess I'm not even going to beat around the bush here. I'll just say it. They don't have a passing attack whatsoever. They haven't had one in 3 years. They just haven't been able to do anything in terms of moving the ball down the field in the air. And I just think that at some point, whether it's late in the season, whether it's conference championship, whether it's Final Four, you've got to be able to pass the ball effectively. And I don't think Kadavian Polk is that guy.
Yeah, you have Hodge almost averaging more per carry than KP is averaging per pass.
Wait, we can pull that up. Is that?
It's an imbalance, right? So KP's averaging 6.76 yards per completion, and Hodge is at 6.07 yards per carry.
Yeah, so let that sink in for a second here, guys. For everyone out there that says that Miami's offense, it doesn't struggle, and KP isn't the reason that they're in these tight late fourth quarter games. 6.7 yards per pass versus 6.0 yards per attempt. I mean,
6.76 per pass, 6.07 per rush.
Like, that's incredible.
So just barely nudging him out.
That's incredible. Let's go ahead and look at I don't know if you had a chance to see the top 5 draft prospects at the quarterback and the running back position that was unveiled last week. Did you get a chance to see those at all? I'll pull them up here so you can see. And as we segue towards the top 5 wide receivers, But let's just go back. Since we're talking about the running back position here, here's what the top 5 running backs looked like. And again, this is not based on stats this year. It's based on what the coaches, who the coaches feel is the best RFL prospect. And this is what the coaches had to say about the running back position. So again, same thing with the point system. If you got a first place vote, you got 5 points because there's only 1 through 5 here. Second place vote was 4, third place vote 3. You can figure out the rest. So by simple mathematics here, you can see that Darnell, there were 7 coaches that submitted their rankings, and Hodge got 34 points. There was 1 coach that had Hodge at the number 2 spot. And I believe the coach that had Hodge at number 2 had Kareem Parker at number 1, and Kareem Parker came in at number 2 here with 23. So Levi Dixon at 3, D'Amico Brewer at 4, and TJ Weston at 5. What are your initial thoughts here on these opening ranks for the draft prospects here in the running back position?
Yeah, I'm good with those. I don't know. I can maybe see the case for Parker up there. I think maybe he has a higher average yards per carry than Hodge, but yeah, I have Hodge at number 1. There's no doubt about that in my mind. Just the way that he looks on paper, with his stats, and then the way he looks on the field too. He's just a different breed of back out there. So he's a clear number 1 for me. The rest look pretty similar to mine, I think, from last week. Yeah, Kareem Parker, Levi Dixon. Might put Levi Dixon up at 2 after this last week. Somebody who's not up there, get your thoughts on Rashad Boston.
Yes.
Arizona State. He's been putting up some solid numbers. He doesn't get quite as many carries, but he's pretty close. He's only averaging about 507. But he's pretty solid back also.
Yeah, so it's interesting, and I'm glad that you say that because Rashad Boston was my number 5. So I believe my 5 were, I think, pretty close to this. I think I had Hodge 1. I believe I had Kareem Parker 2. And then if I didn't have Levi Dixon 3 and D'Amico Brewer 4, then I had them switched. And then I had Rashad Boston at number 5. But it was close because I also thought that Kazim Cash, I thought, has been playing a little bit better. Jacarius Best playing a little bit better. But I just think overall, we saw Rashad Boston a lot last year. And I think he looked really good last year too. So that's why I had him at number 5. And I'm glad that, you kind of agree with me there. That's Rashad Boston is one of those running backs that people should be paying attention to. Obviously, an Arizona State team that doesn't have a ton of user submits, but certainly Rashad Boston playing well. I believe he's a generic playing well for Arizona State.
He is.
All right, let's go to the quarterback again. These are the ones that we unveiled last week. So we got a few more minutes here until we get to the official unveiling of the wide receivers. But just real quick, Baker, going to go back and show you what the top 5 quarterback prospects looked like. And again, this is from the coaches. This isn't me. This isn't Coach Baker. This is a collective group of coaches ranking the quarterback. So I mentioned it earlier. Miles McCain comes in at number 1 because he has the most points. However, there was not a single coach that put Miles McCain at number 1 in their rankings. So what that tells us is that a lot of coaches have Miles McCain, right in the middle, basically. No one has him really not receiving. Everybody has them in the top 5, maybe the top 4. And a lot of guys have him certainly in that top 3 area because there were 7 coaches submitting their rankings and he got 24 points. So if you do the simple math there, you're looking at he received an average of 3.4 points per coach. So if you're looking at it, he basically averaged somewhere in between quarterback 2 and quarterback 3 on every single coach's ballot. So this is your first time getting a look at these rankings here. What are your thoughts on how these quarterbacks have been ranked by us coaches as we get prepared for the draft?
I'm going to sound a little bit like a Calvin Poole hater, I guess, but I definitely didn't have him at 2. I think I may have even had him at 4 or maybe even 5. I think I had him at 4 though.
I believe somebody had him off. Was that you? Could it have been you?
I don't think so.
Okay.
I think I had him at either 4 or 5.
Okay.
I definitely had McCain at 2. I think he's the clear number 2. I don't know. I guess I could see. Coach, I'm surprised that nobody put him at 1. I'll just say that. I do think he is number 1 caliber type quarterback. I think I had Tajay Gaddy ahead of him last week. I had him at 2. I think I had Uchia in there last week, maybe at 5.
I did see some votes for Uchia.
Yeah, I think he's got some talent. I like the way he plays. He's putting up some decent numbers. I know that'll make Bill happy out there as well if he's listening in. That I put his guy on the list. But overall, I don't think you can argue with this list, except for me maybe dropping Calvin Poole a little bit. I'm just not seeing that QB1 out of him yet this season. And maybe that's me kind of holding it against him because he was so good last year, and expecting him to play up to that same level, so far this year, and him not quite getting there, at least in my mind. So that may be a little bit of a bias on my side, just, not seeing him perform like he did last season.
All right. So here's another comment here. Super Cam, Poole is number 1 for me. No questions asked. Yeah, I mean, I get the emphasis, and, I certainly think that there's plenty of questions that could be asked. Again, we're looking at this in terms of RFL prospect. So the number 1 question when it comes to this is he's a generic, right? And so if you are a coach and your philosophy is you only want user submitted players, then it's going to be hard to put Calvin Poole at number 1 on this list. It's going to be hard to draft Calvin Poole as that first quarterback if you subscribe to that theory where, you don't want generics, you don't like generics, or you aren't going to draft generics. Calvin Poole is a generic. He's the only generic on this list. And so again, I guess that would be the question there. Super Cam says, no questions asked. Well, that's the question. That's where people would potentially question Calvin Poole. And I would imagine, Baker, that's part of the reason. Is that part of the reason why you had him at 4 or 5? Or is it simply, or does the generic aspect of it not weigh into your decision whatsoever, and it's strictly based on performance on the field and what you've seen?
Yeah, I don't think about it from the submitted or generic standpoint when I'm ranking the players for this purpose. It will weigh in a little bit. It'll weigh in a lot. I think it will for most coaches. I have a column on my spreadsheet called work ethic, and that's where I put in everyone's reload points. So that's a big part of what we'll be looking for. A big part of what the other coaches will be looking for. But as far as the rankings go here, I didn't really take that into account. I think a coach might even maybe want a generic at quarterback so they can pick and choose. If they're doing the Patreon, they can pick and choose where those points are going. I can definitely see the benefit there.
So let's pause for a second, because I want to drive that point home, because you just brought up a very good point that I don't think everyone watching right now completely understands. So go ahead and, if you want, elaborate on that a little bit, and what you just said and what that actually means to the people that might not completely understand.
Right. So when you are buying your boost, your packages and your boost, it's largely out of your control, right? Unless you're spending the $50K to buy the top tier, and you get to choose where 3 of those points are going. As coaches, when we're doing Patreon, we get 5 points every 4 weeks, and we pick where all 5 of those points are going.
Right.
So if I'm drafting a quarterback, and all things equal, one's a generic, one's a submitted player, and maybe the submitted player only has 40,000 reloads, then I'm probably going with the generic, because I know that I can get a full season's worth of Patreon boost out of them at 5 points a pop every 4 weeks, and I can drop those 5 anywhere I want, up to 85. We still have the same the same restrictions there. But you can do a lot of work on a quarterback, especially if it's a top tier quarterback that probably has pretty even stats across the board, and then maybe one glaring deficiency like play action or maybe throwing to pressure really low form. But you can bump that up, drop 15 points on that and get that up real quick. So that's kind of how I look at it, and I think a lot of coaches look at it that way. I know, a lot of coaches really focus in on the reload points. I do too, because you want to have those people on your team. You want to have those players that can develop their own player, because we do only get the one player to Patreon, and just within the game itself, you don't get a ton of XP, and you're trying to figure out, which 3 players you're going to focus train every week, and that can sometimes be a challenge too. I go into every season thinking I know which 3 players I'm going to focus train throughout the entire season, and in week 2 I'm already switching it up and changing my mind. So that's that's kind of how I look at it. Just having that control over which attributes are being upgraded on a player is very valuable, I think. But I do want to make a point real quick. For people that say that Calvin Poole is their number one, unquestionably, I would just ask, would you have your top rated quarterback ranked 12th in QBR? So the number 12th ranked quarterback overall in QBR, is that your number one quarterback? Unquestionably. Okay, 5th in passing yards. So Calvin Poole's 5th in passing yards. So is that the number one quarterback? Unquestionably. Yards per reception or yards per completion, he's ranked 13th. So is that an unquestionable number one quarterback? And then the last one here, completion percentage, he's ranked 15th among quarterbacks. So given all of that, I can't say that he's unquestionably the number one quarterback. To me, he's top 5, somewhat because of what he did last year, and I know what he's capable of, and then somewhat from his play this year. He still looks good on the field, right? He still looks good on film. He's made a few mistakes here and there. His his touchdown interception ratio is not all that great right now, 12-6. So I think he just, what did he throw, 1 this past week, to get that up. So again, unquestionably number one, I don't think so.
What do you think?
Can you justify 3, 4, or 5? I think you can easily justify that.
I don't know. I don't necessarily agree with this comment here from Cam Baker. Poole's good, but he benefits from his running back more than most quarterbacks on this list. If you think Calvin Poole benefits from his running back, then what are you going to say about Miles McCain? Because for whatever Calvin Poole might benefit from the running back, Miles McCain benefits tenfold from his wide receivers. Miles McCain might have the 2 best wide receivers in the league that he gets to throw the ball to. So, I mean, if you're going to say, I'd be curious to see I'd be curious to see who Cam Baker would have as the number one quarterback, because if he's going to say Miles McCain is the number one quarterback because Calvin Poole benefits from the running game, well, what does Miles McCain benefit from? I mean, I'd rather benefit from 2 superstar stud wide receivers than benefit from Levi Dixon. Like, Levi Dixon's never been, the number one running back. He's good. He's probably going to finish top 5, but I don't know. I don't agree with that comment there. Do you understand the logic there, or what do you think about Cam Baker's comment there?
Yeah, I think if you're going to try to make an argument for Poole, then you say, well, look what he has to work with for weapons, right? So he's got Williams, Miller, Harris, and Horn. None of those guys are standout. I think Williams is an 83 overall, maybe. Miller, Harris, and Horn are maybe high 80s, low 90s. So just the weapons that he has at his disposal, I think, is the one argument you can make in his favor. Look what he's doing with what he's got. And Dixon has been playing really well. Yes, I think. I don't get that argument. I tend to agree with you on that. You flip it and ask what's McCain working with from a running back standpoint, and I don't think it holds water.
Yeah, and I guess Baker's not the only one. Rohan here too. Great point, Cam. I just don't agree. Like, Poole's the only quarterback on that list with a top running back. Okay, so let's just, if we go back to the list here and we pull up, so Poole is the only quarterback on this list with a top running back. I think that is mildly disrespectful to Euro Winbush at Ohio State. And maybe that's about it. I mean, West Virginia, nothing much there. TCU, Berry Hills, kind of Javier Santana. I mean, Brennan Haskins is underrated. But yeah, okay, fine. I'll give you Levi Dixon is the best running back on any one of these 5 teams. But I don't care. I'm not drawing as direct a correlation as I guess Cam and Rohan are in terms of downgrading the quarterback position or the quarterback stock simply because the running back on his team is really good. I'm just that's not me. Clearly you heard Baker's thoughts. He doesn't necessarily subscribe to that theory either. But let's go ahead and get into it. Let's do these top 5
real quick.
Yeah,
real quick, done. I see Supercam's comment also on, he's making the passes. He looks good on the field. There's a handful of quarterbacks that look good on the field and are making passes that I haven't seen before. Look at Ronnie Football. Was it last week? He's rolling out and he does the shovel pass upfield. I had never seen that in Madden before, right? I think Tyon is making plays that look really good. Throwing on the run, moving around the pocket, scrambling. So there's, I think I wouldn't say a lot, but I'd say 4 or 5 other quarterbacks that look really good while they're playing, but still aren't putting up the big numbers and the big stats. But I agree. I think again on the field, I think Calvin Poole looks like an RFL caliber quarterback. I just don't think he's the clear number one.
Well, and now I guess I'm a little bit confused even more by the comment, the last sentiment here, because a minute ago, Cam, you were talking about downgrading Calvin Poole's stock because his running game is so good. But now you're saying, I think Dixon is taking some of the touchdowns away from Poole. That's a good thing for Poole in terms of his stock, because that says, imagine how good, look, he's this good now. Imagine how good he would be if his running back wasn't basically vulturing touchdowns in the red zone. So if you're going to say that Dixon is taking away some of the touchdown potential from Calvin Poole, then from my perspective as an RFL scout and general manager, that's not downgrading Calvin Poole's stock at all. If anything, I'm bumping up his stock because I think, hey, I can get this guy to throw touchdowns. And in college, he just wasn't getting as many touchdown passes because they were handing the ball off and handing the ball off and handing the ball off. But if I want to get him more touchdowns and I want to get him more involved in the passing game, throwing the ball more, I can scheme for that. And USC might not be, right? I mean, does that make sense to you, Baker?
Yeah,
I'm looking
very intently at these comments here. I think, I was a little bit confused too. I think maybe we're trying to make the same point as Cam's making. Cam, are you trying to say that Poole isn't that good? Because that's what I'm trying to say, is he's not that good. He's not a number one. So maybe we're agreeing on that point. I think you're saying that he does get a lot of benefit from Dixon. Sure, he gets some benefit from Dixon. And maybe that just, adds some fuel to my argument that he's, potentially not that good. If he did not have such a good running back, then maybe he would not even be performing as good or not as good as I think he's performing this season.
All right. And I see another question here in the chat from Faded Red. When will we get a 2 to 3 round mock draft? So I let Back do the mock draft stuff. He got together with Mitchie and did some of that a little bit earlier on, I believe in the off season prior to the college season 4 starting. So I know Back has talked about that with Mitchie about doing a mid-season mock draft. I'm not exactly sure when that will be. I haven't really talked to him much about it. If he wants me to be involved with it, by all means, Back, if you want, me to be involved, I will. But yeah, I kind of, to answer your question, Vader Red, I let Back handle that. I try not to, I do the rankings things here and he can do the mock drafts, but we don't want to try doing too much of the same thing because then it just gets kind of redundant. It's better to get, new creative ideas and stuff, new content for you guys. So keep an eye out for that mock draft. I know Back will have that at some point in the next couple weeks. What do we got here? All right, let's just get into it because we're already at the hour mark here. So let's go ahead and unveil the top 5 wide receivers in terms of RFL draft potential, RFL draft prospects at the wide receiver position. Again, I say that because I want to stress this is not based on stats and who has the most touchdowns this year, who has the most receiving yards this year, who has the fewest drops this year. Okay. It is based on what we as coaches have decided we think are the top 5 wide receivers come RFL draft day. All right. So without any further ado, nobody has seen this list. Baker, you are seeing this for the first time. Everyone is seeing this list for the first time. So here we go. The top 5 wide receiver prospects for the RFL draft. In at number 5, Amari Harris at TCU. In at number 4, Caleb Houston at Ohio State. DeAndre Campbell at Clemson comes in at number 3. DJ Evans at Baylor in at number 2. And then Devontrez Sharkley is the number 1 wide receiver. And one thing I will point out here, as you can clearly see, there is a wide gap between Devontrez Sharkley and anyone else on this list. Now, does that mean he's going to be the first wide receiver taken in the draft? No, not at all. Because there might be a coach out there that didn't have, I can tell you can look by the points. There was obviously one coach that did not have Sharkley as the number 1 wide receiver. And again, this is only 7 coaches. There could be several coaches out there that might think DJ Evans or DeAndre Campbell or Caleb Houston or Amari Harris or someone not even on this list by the end of the season is the best wide receiver option. But right now, these are the top 5 wide receivers as comprised by the coaches for the RFL draft coming up later on this year. So, Baker, you're looking at this list for the very first time. What are your initial thoughts?
Well, first of all, I think that point differential there from Sharkley to the next 4 is very well deserved. I think there's some clear separation there. I think he's proven that he can be that deep threat, and he can be that guy that makes a catch over the middle, breaks some tackles, and that can take it to the house too. I feel like he's the most well-rounded receiver right now. Almost halfway through the season here, so no shocker there. I guess the bigger shock is that somebody didn't have him as the clear-cut number 1, kind of like with Hodge last week.
Right.
DJ Evans, I could see that. I had him rated a little bit lower. Campbell, definitely. Remind me why you have Campbell in green there. Did he get the most first overall?
No, Campbell's in green because he's the image.
Oh, okay. Gotcha.
Yeah.
Campbell, yep, that makes sense to me. Houston is going to be a bit of a head scratcher for me. When I was looking at this, I was looking more so at the statistical side of things, and he's struggling this year. Is he a great talent? He's kind of the prototype big receiver, deep threat. We saw that a lot last year out of him. He was just roasting guys left and right. I don't know what exactly it is this season. Maybe, just offense isn't clicking or running through him as much as it did last season. Could be just, the way the game's playing this year. You never know, but it doesn't change, his submitted attributes. It doesn't change his attributes in game. Just something's off this year. I can't put him in the top 5 based on that. 305 yards so far this season, 11.73 average. Not a lot of rack, not a lot of touchdowns, 5 touchdowns. So, by Caleb Houston standards, that's not good enough, right? He set a pretty high bar for himself last season. And again, kind of the same comments I had for Calvin Poole, maybe because he was so good last season and is not repeating that this season. There's probably a little bit of bias there on my end. Omar Harris Jr. I had rated a little bit higher. I think him and Sharkley are up there in the 1-2, top 3 range, both of those guys, from what we've seen them be able to do out there on the field. Actually, a little bit surprised to see him only getting 8 points and coming in there at 5. I'm guessing, 5 through 10 or even 5 through 15, we're all pretty close on points if you track it down that far. But yeah, a little surprised to see him there at 8. I would expect him to be a little bit higher.
Yeah, so I'll just say for those wondering, who number 6 would have been, number 6 on the list would have been Trey Drain at West Virginia. He had 6 points, and I believe number 7 would have been Frederick Irving at Washington. So for those of you wondering, that's what 6 and 7 would have looked like. I will say one thing here too, that, a lot of people might not recognize, but if you look at 1 through 5 on this list, every single one of those receivers is at least 6 feet tall. And in the case of Devontrez Sharkley, he's 6'6". DJ Evans is 6'2". Caleb Houston is 6'2". Amari Harris is 6'2". DeAndre Campbell is the shortest guy on this list, and he's 6 feet tall. So it just goes to show you, like, in terms of, I guess, dominance on field, a lot of the guys that we're seeing dominate are those bigger, taller receivers. Now, I think that changes when you get to the RFL level, because in the RFL level, everything is a little bit more balanced. Some of the reasons why, Sharkley's 6'6" and he's got 99 speed. So he's going to burn almost every single corner that he plays in college. And if he doesn't burn them, he's going to out jump them at the high point and come down with almost every single ball that's contested by any corner in college. When you get to the RFL, it's a little bit different. So, well, yes, obviously you can see that the taller receivers are having a lot of success here in college. There are a lot of those slot guys, 5'10", 5'9", 5'11" receivers with 99 speed and 90 release. And those guys have really solid seasons and really solid performances at the RFL level. Would you agree with that kind of breakdown? And I don't want guys to get too enamored with, being 6'2" or 6'3" or above here.
Yeah, I don't think. Well, it's hard to say, right? Because we're dealing with a different game every year, right? A new cycle of Madden, and we never really know what's going to happen until we get in game and start running some sims. This year will be unique because of the new features they have with it, and because of the contested catches. You're going to see a lot more. I think you're going to see fewer of those jump balls where they're coming down with it now that hopefully the cornerbacks are able to go up and contest that without throwing them into a standard, pre-programmed animation. We'll see. I haven't been in the game yet, haven't tested it yet, but I think to that point, maybe height isn't going to be as much of a big deal. If you've got, a 6 foot receiver, 6'1", with, 90, 95 jump, that might be a big difference. Whereas if you're 6'4" or so and you have a 75 jump, maybe that's a thing this year. So right. Maybe the jump attribute is the key. And of course, they're going to be going up a DB who also has, there are some tall folks in the league already. We picked up one in the offseason in Parker Palmer, who's 6'3", partially for that reason. But he's a guy that doesn't have a very high jump rating. So it'll be interesting to see how it all plays out. I think that 6 foot, sub 6 foot, pretty much across the board, whatever your height your receiver is, they can still be successful in the RFL. It just depends on their attributes, really the system that they're in and who's throwing to them, what kind of routes they're running, and if a coach can find out or figure out how to utilize them within that system and get them open.
And I think, too, it also goes back to your point earlier that we were talking about the generic versus the user submit. The benefit that we as coaches have with generics is that we can boost those attributes wherever we want. So if you have a 5'10" receiver and you want to boost his jump rating up, again, you can only go up to an 85, but the sooner you get to that 85, the better off you're going to be, because in their younger years, they're going to naturally earn more XP and potentially boost naturally in those categories. So there's certainly the ability, if you're a coach and you have a generic wide receiver that's a little young and you want to Patreon boost them, you can pretty much boost wherever you want. Like you were saying about the quarterback position, you can really do the same thing about the wide receiver position. One thing I'll say,
and
go
I
ahead.
was just going to say real quick, Dunn, on a personal note too, I don't want to see everybody submit a 6'4" and above wide receiver. I want to see guys submit, players that are. It's fun to me when they submit players that are kind of in their likeness. If you're a 5'9" guy like me, submit a 5'9" receiver. If you're 6'6", then submit a 6'6" receiver.
But don't put a 5'9" O lineman.
Yeah, no, I would not be an O lineman. No, definitely not. But the variety in the game, the variety in the submissions, is part of the fun for me. It's breaking down. Is this 6'3" guy going to be better than this 5'10" guy? And looking at their attributes and comparing them, and then seeing how they play on the field. For me, that's part of the reason I'm here is just I'm a geek like that. I dig into the stats. I enjoy watching the games and watching the matchups and all that, and seeing how all of that plays out when it's completely out of your control, right? So I haven't touched the sticks in, I don't know, probably 10, 15 years in Madden. Well, I take that back. I was in a league where I actually played and very quickly realized that I'm horrible. And then all of my great GM skills and finding the right pieces, the right players, putting them in the right position is completely overridden by my lack of skills with the joystick. So
yeah, when you start playing,
stop doing that, and found this league, which is incredible.
So one other name that I mentioned, he wasn't on the top 5. I said he would have come in at number 7, was Frederick Irving, the wide receiver at Washington. And many of you might not know that name. Many of you might not be watching as much Washington Huskies football as you should. Because when you look at Irving right now, he currently leads the nation in touchdowns with 8. Okay. And then if you go to yards, he's still in the top 5 in yards. He's 5th with 500 total yards. And then if you go to receptions, he's a little bit lower, but he comes in 8th in receptions with 37. But only 4 receptions separate him from the number 4 spot. And if we're only looking at the wide receiver position and we remove tight ends from the equation, then he is the 2nd wide receiver in terms of overall receptions. DeAndre Campbell has 38 and Frederick Irving has 37. So basically, Frederick Irving is 2nd in the country in receptions. He's 5th in the country in yards, and he's 1st in the country in touchdowns. And this is a guy that was not in the league last year. This is a guy who we are just now being able to see for the very first time. And 5 weeks into the season, he has already made a name for himself to the point where he's not in the top 5, but he's knocking on the door. He's really close.
Yeah, you can make a case for him, I think, but you have to pull somebody off the list. So
right, and who are you going to
pull? I think that's the challenge here is who do you pull off the list to put Frederick Irving up there? He's also, I think, 2nd in reception, so he's out there doing work. There are a couple other names that I think you could maybe make a case for. I don't know if you mentioned Connor Jameson, but he's got 470-ish yards. He's averaging 24.68 per catch. The issue is he only has 19 receptions. So if he can get more touches, get more targets, and kind of keep that average up, I think he could potentially be, or he has the potential to be a top 5 receiver if we can get those catches up. The other one is Jay Watt, who I think is a very solid receiver as well, but only 15 receptions on the season. He's another guy that's averaging over 24 yards per reception. He's got 5 touchdowns. But again, it's hard to make the case for somebody with only 15 receptions on the year.
Yeah, I think the issue for Connor Jameson is that the running back play, Kareem Parker at Maryland, that they lean a lot on Kareem Parker. And so that takes away certainly potential receptions, as you mentioned, the very few receptions there. But then also Chip Taylor's playing really well too. He's just kind of moving the ball around a little bit, and Jameson's not getting as much in way of the receptions. But certainly, I don't think I had Jameson in my top 5. I think I had him out. Actually, I know I didn't have him in my top 5 because I just went and looked at all of the results, and nobody had Jameson in the top 5. But again, I don't think he's far, to your point. I see a question in the chat here from QPOC. How is Campbell over Huncho? So Huncho is Tyreek Bryant at Georgia. How is DeAndre Campbell over Huncho? The simple answer is because we're not stupid. But the calculated and more thought out answer is it is the coaches poll. It is put together by coaches, and you get 5 points for a first place vote, 4 points for a second place vote, and it's all based on points. So when you look at what those were, DeAndre Campbell got 14 points. So that means he had, maybe 2 coaches had him. Well, no, he couldn't have 2. Maybe, 3 coaches had him as the number 2 receiver. That would have given him 12 points. And then 1 coach had him as the number 4 receiver. That would have given him 2 points. If you're curious as to where Bryant would have fallen, what I can tell you is I know that he did get some run on this list. And he did not get any first place votes. He did not get any second place votes. He did not get any third place votes. Tyreek Bryant got 1 vote for wide receiver number 4. And that's it. So he would have come in with a total of 2 points, obviously falling short of this list. Clyde Mabry got 1 vote for wide receiver 5. Tip Soto got 1 vote for wide receiver 5. And that's about it. Other than, like I said, Trey Drain would have been number 6. Frederick Irving would have been number 7. And then I guess Tyreek Bryant would have been number 8. And Tip Soto and Clyde Mabry would have been tied for wide receiver 9 / wide receiver 10. And that basically would be your top 10 right there. But that's, again, only because those guys received votes in the top 5. If we extrapolated this out and we asked coaches to do top 10 rankings, Tip Soto and Clyde Mabry might not be in the top 10 because collectively other coaches might have other receivers that they boosted up inside that 6 through 10 range. And again, it's all based on points. So DeAndre Campbell got 14 points and Tyreek Bryant only got 2. So again, I don't need a mathematical equation to tell me that DeAndre Campbell is a better receiver than Tyreek Bryant. But if you want a mathematical equation, there it is. All right, Baker, I'll get you out of here in a minute. Just any final thoughts on any of those ranks here? We saw the top 5 quarterbacks, top 5 running backs, top 5 wide receivers, or the coaches poll. Any final thoughts on anything as we head into week 6?
I'll weigh in real quick on Bryant as well. I think Bryant's a great receiver. Probably maybe one of my favorites so far this season, but I didn't have him in my top 5 either. I don't think you can make an argument for him over Campbell. Campbell with 38 receptions, 613 yards. To me, that says Campbell's working. He's getting open. And he has the most receptions in the league so far. So that argument doesn't hold any water for me. I definitely think Campbell belongs up there. General thoughts, I'm really enjoying the college series here. Like I mentioned, I geek out over it, keep up with the stats. I redo my draft board probably 5 to 10 times a week. I'm always around. I think I posted that somewhere yesterday. I typically don't message a lot, but I'm always in the chat and always at the games and just kind of listening and watching, seeing who's active and who's out there supporting the league and supporting their team, and who in general just has a good attitude about things. That's, I think, important for a lot of coaches. When we talk about drafting players, one of the great things about this league is that it's not a rush league like some others where they're running 3, 4, 5 weeks in a calendar week. So you draft somebody and you're stuck with them for at least 4 full years in your locker room. So to me, that's very important as well. You want guys that you enjoy being around, that you enjoy talking to and having in the locker room and that kind of stuff. So just my 2 cents on that, being active and being active in the chat and just overall being a decent human being.
Yeah, and I guess further to that point, Anthony Fry posed a question here. What user submitted players do you currently have? Do you have? I know I only have, I guess, user submitted players. I have several, but in terms of how many of them to this day are still active, I believe I only have one, and that's Anthony Fry. Derek Oliveros was a user submit for me. Obviously, Jakari Torres, Kenny Forrester, TJ Metcalf, Pavel Frederick. Those guys are all user submits, but it's been difficult to get them to the activity level that I would like. I try, but some guys, it just doesn't work out. How many guys do you have? I guess maybe you don't know the exact answer for submitted players, but in terms of active players in your locker room, how many guys do you have?
Active, not that many. We have a handful of submitted players. We just picked up Parker Palmer in the offseason, this time around. I have seen him in the chat every once in a while. He messages me back. I'm trying to get him a little bit more active as well because I think he has a good foundation at cornerback that we can build on. Just need to get some reloads in and do some work there. Some other guys, we picked up Victor Middleton last offseason. Victor Middleton's a guy that I do see him every once in a while in YouTube chat. So definitely want him to be more active as well and build up his wide receiver. Definitely a very solid foundation there. He's probably going to be our number 4 wide receiver this season coming up. So he is going to get some targets and hopefully start to build up his player. We drafted Gunnar Witt 2 drafts ago, but he's not really active in here anymore. I know there's some Gunnar Witt fans out there at halfback. Of course, you all saw what happened with his last season at halfback there towards the end of the season with Marcus Morton coming in and really playing well. It's probably his job to lose going forward. So, Witt's kind of the number 2 guy there. But you never know. He might work his way back into the starting lineup. We had, we had Preston McGee until this offseason. He was our backup quarterback. And I'm trying to think who else we have. I think that might be it, unless there are some older players that I just don't know that they were some. Actually, I think who is it? Terrence Ward, I think, was a submit, but I think that might have been Mitch many years ago, several seasons ago. So that one obviously doesn't count for us anymore.
All right, we'll get you out of here in less than 2 minutes, if you can. What is your favorite part of the draft process, the interviews, making the draft boards, etc.? What, from Nathaniel Diggs in the chat, what is your favorite part of the draft process?
Oh, that's a tough one. Really the whole thing, that's kind of a cop-out answer. I get it, but really just that atmosphere. I get nervous right before it, just going back over my draft board and trying to run through all the scenarios in my head. If this person gets taken here, who's my backup there? And, do we want to go a completely different direction if this one person gets taken? Just kind of the chess game, I think, is the big part of it for me, trying to figure out who other teams are going to take so you can plan out your draft. And then, kind of in the back of your mind, trying to think who's going to be the wild card, who's going to be that first coach that does something just totally off the wall and blow up everybody's draft board.
Like take a kicker in the first round?
Well, no, that wasn't too bad because that was,
What?
late in the round. I mean, yeah, it was bad, but not. I don't think that blew up a lot of people's draft boards, right? I think that probably helped a lot of people on their draft boards. But just, I think there's going to be early on maybe a couple of big surprises in that 2 and 3 spot. You've got Frankie there at 2 and Roland there at 3. And I don't know, man, they kind of strike me as kind of the wild cards. So who knows what can happen there at 2 or 3. And obviously, we're very interested in seeing that because we're right there behind them at 4. Could be some really good players slip through the top 3 there and be available for us. But who knows? I have no idea. I have no idea what to expect out of them. And that's part of the fun, too, is just not really knowing how it's going to go. And, seeing the reactions out of Smitty and Bill and Rob, seeing them kind of break down the picks afterwards and giving their opinion on it and not being shy about, saying if somebody blew it in their mind or questioning them or calling them out on it. So it's just the entire process, man. It's a lot of fun. It's a fun, 3 or 4 days that we get to do that.
It certainly is. It really is a good
And it's coming up soon, man. It's going to be here before we know it. I definitely like the way that we're doing it now with College Series Draft, RFL season.
Yep. It's perfect. That's the way it's supposed to be.
Yep.
All right. Well, Coach Baker, appreciate the time. We'll go ahead and get you out of here. We've got a couple minutes left. We'll close up and get prepared for the RFL podcast. But again, appreciate the time and we'll talk soon. All right.
Yep. Appreciate it.
All right, man. Take care. All right, Coach Baker, head coach and general manager of the Houston Voyagers, kind enough to join me tonight on Miners Live. A couple quick things that I want to mention before we go on and get out of here. Big announcement for all of you CS4 prospects, all of you College Series 4 prospects. You've seen the coaches poll that I recently put together with all the other coaches. What I'm also going to do, and I'm going to send this out possibly even tonight, I'm going to throw out the community poll. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to send out that same form and I'm going to give you guys the opportunity to put your top 10 together. And so that'll be a way for all of you guys to come up with who you think the top 10 teams are. And we can kind of look at that and it'll be a little fun exercise, give you guys an opportunity to be a little bit more involved, be a little bit more active, and curious to see what you guys feel the top 10 is versus what we as coaches feel the top 10 is. So be on the lookout for that. I will put that out in the RFL community channel, that form for you guys to go ahead and fill out. So I appreciate that. And also for those of you that were not paying attention to the trade block and the accepted trades recently, the Sacramento Miners now have 3 first-round picks. Yes, you heard that correct. We will be drafting 3 times in the first round. We just recently acquired pick 12 overall. So now the Miners will be selecting the 12th pick, the 23rd pick, and the 29th pick. So 3 picks in the top 30, and then also the 7th pick in round 2. So 4 picks in the first 39. So basically we'll be picking every 10 picks, really. So there's going to be a lot of Sacramento Miners talk on day 1 of the RFL draft. So for those of you that are active, for those of you that are out there, for those of you that find yourself in a position of need for the Sacramento Miners, now is the time to step up. But certainly looking to build on the future. We won the division the last 2 years, went to the playoffs, and lost in the first round. There were some big changes this year, getting rid of AJ Pestock, getting rid of Chum Lee. We have to start looking towards the future. And that time is now. And that time is with you guys. There are a lot of you user-submitted prospects right now. There are a lot of overall prospects. I believe close to 300 overall prospects. That's why I felt the need to acquire more top-end draft capital, because we got rid of 2 of our best players in Chum Lee and AJ Pestock, 2 of our captains in Chum Lee and AJ Pestock. So 4 picks in the first 39. And then we also have 2 picks in round 4, as well as another pick in round 3. So if you do that math there, that's 4, 5, 7 picks in the first 4 rounds. And the last one in round 4 is 417. So 7 picks before the 17th pick in the 4th round. So there will be a lot of action during the draft for the Sacramento Miners. So feel free to reach out to me in Discord. If you have an interest in joining the team, let me know. Right now, Anthony Fry, my director of scouting, is helping me put together our draft board. So we do have some guys that we're looking at. We have some positions more than anything that we're looking at. So the number one thing that I can say, guys, is be active, be vocal, be outgoing. But most of all, just be a supporter of the league. Be a supporter of the league. And with that, I will get you guys out of here. It is 8:30. Go on over to the RFL Draft podcast, the RFL podcast, and see what the new top 25 looks like. You saw the coaches poll. Let's see what the new top 25 looks like. Thanks again for everyone. If you haven't already, be sure to follow us on Twitter at MinersRFL and on Instagram at MinersRFL. Hit that subscribe button if you haven't already. Until next week, I am your host, Chris Dunn, head coach and general manager of the Sacramento Miners. We'll see you next week. Enjoy the RFL podcast and take care, everybody. Have a good night.